Hello and thank you for joining us at xm.com for this Forex Preview video. U.S. inflation for October is out on Thursday, and even though markets expect a slowdown, it's likely to be a minor one. I'm Christina Maroucos. Helping me unpack our data set today is our senior investment analyst, Marios Hadjikyriacos. Marios, Fed Chair Powell reiterated recently that the bank's main focus is to bring inflation down. Thus, Thursday's report will be crucial for the pace of future Fed rate increases. Could we see a significant slowdown in the CPI, and what would that mean for the Fed?
Hello, Christina. I doubt we are going to see a significant slowdown, but we are most likely going to see some improvement. So let's take a step back. The Fed has done a series of rate increases, very quick rate increases this year, and yet we haven't really seen any noticeable improvement in inflation. Inflation looks to have plateaued at a relatively high level rather than coming down outright. Nevertheless, the Fed is very committed to get the job done. Last week, Chairman Powell essentially said that he prefers to cause a brief recession and get inflation under control that way, rather than allow inflation to run amok for several years, because he thinks that that's going to cause even greater damage to the economy, right? So the Fed is saying we're going to continue raising rates, or we're going to keep rates very high until inflation comes down, even if that means a period of economic pain. And the markets seem to have absorbed this message, because they are pricing in a peak in the federal funds rate just above 5%. Let's call it 5.1% currently. Now, as for this week's data set, Christina, yes, we're expected to see a little bit of improvement in inflation. The headline inflation rate is expected to go from 8.2% down to 8%. That's certainly a step in the right direction, but it wouldn't be a game changer for the Fed either, right? Now, as for any risks surrounding these forecasts, I think, if anything, if we do see any surprises, I think it's more likely to be a softer than expected number. And I base that on several indicators. For example, business surveys for the month. They showed that American companies raised their selling prices at the slowest pace in almost 2 years in October. Now, at the same time, we saw further improvement in used car prices, in shipping costs. So all of that argues for some cooling down inflation. But on the other side of the spectrum, we've got the rents, right? Rents tend to mirror what house prices have done, but with a lag of more than a year. So even though most of the categories in the CPI basket are cooling, rents are still playing catch up with what house prices did last year, right? And that's what's likely to offset any serious improvement in inflation.
And what could the market reaction be, Marios, in the case we do get a softer than expected CPI print?
Well, right now, the markets are leaning towards the Fed slowing down in December, essentially. The markets are leaning towards a 50 basis points rate increase. And if we do get a relatively soft inflation data set, that could cement those expectations. The dollar could take a step back. Now, in the bigger picture, Christina, I'm getting the sense that the dollar is approaching its peak, but we are not quite there yet. So I'm starting to see a lot of signs that argue for that. Whether it's this month or next month or closer to the end of the year, we are getting clearer signs that inflation is cooling. And the Fed is about to shift into lower gear, right? They're going to slow down with rate increases. So that argues for some softening in the dollar overall. And the dollar is already a very crowded trade, right? Everybody is long dollars. Now, meanwhile, the fundamentals for other currencies have started to improve. Not a lot, just a little bit, but enough to cause a little bit of a rethink around the dollar. So energy prices in Europe have come down. A semblance of stability has returned to the United Kingdom. The Bank of Japan opened the door for normalizing monetary policy. So I'm getting the sense that the dollar hasn't peaked quite yet. We might still see new highs, but the scope for further gains is looks quite limited to me from here.
Marios, thanks so much. This was a Forex preview for US CPI coming up on Thursday here at XM.com.